or integrity, whether you lied or not. Canadians really cared about whether you're honest, particularly because you are elected official. So, and I think in this case, after all, there have been golden rules in terms of crisis management, which is that you have to tell the story, everything about it, and full version. I mean, but what Kam Nai-wai is doing, that is just like the way you squeeze the toothpaste. When you are being questioned, you squeeze the toothpaste a little bit, and when someone asks you again, you squeeze a little bit more. Like you're not really putting everything on the table. So I think this is the tricky part.
Yeah, I agree with you. In some ways, it is ironic that probably David Letterman will probably stay in his job and his ratings will increase by 20%, whereas this guy, Kam Nai-wai, there's a high chance he might lose his job, actually, even though, he didn't actually do anything physical, if you like.
Because nobody votes David Letterman.
That's the difference. The difference is David is not a lawmaker, actually. And you're right, it is about integrity and about abuse of power, actually.
If Kam Nai-wai really resigned, I mean, are you interested to run, Matt?
I think very few people would vote for me, unfortunately. I'd be... I don't know. I'll be tough.
No, you are in the media spotlight lately. You can seize the opportunity.
People are aware of me, but I think I'm probably a bit too controversial in some ways.
And in terms of appearance, you look much sassier than Kam Nai-wai.
That's true, actually. Now I've lost weight. I've lost 20 kg after having been in the prison for a few months.
Have you ever think to be a politician? I mean,
well, I would argue a political activist is actually, in some ways a politician, actually. And, in some ways I would say as an activist doing what I'm doing outside the Legislative Council, in some ways, I can have some influence and do things that lawmakers can't do, actually. The old saying that a lawmaker can't be a lawbreaker. But I would argue what I'm doing, in some ways, I'm hoping, to get other political groups thinking that sometimes it's not only justifiable, but it's morally the right thing to do to engage in civil disobedience, you see.
Exactly.
And that whole argument, I think, needs to be discussed within the democracy movement, and there needs to be someone to get people thinking about that whole idea, really, whether it is morally the right thing to do to engage in civil disobedience.
Yes.
We've got a few other issues we want to talk about.
And I think it's time for the break.
It's time for the break.
Because Kam Nai-wai is such a hot and sassy issue that it occupied the whole segment.
We're moving on. We after the break, we've got some other controversial issues we want to talk about, actually, as well, to do with LSD and the democracy movement and some other things that have happened in the past week or two.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But honestly, if there's really a by-election, I would campaign for you.
So I might get 1 or 2 votes.
I'll be your interpreter. And I teach you Cantonese. Right?
Okay. All right. See you after the break. Yeah. Power can be taken, but not given. It is the process of taking which is empowerment in itself. This is Matt Pearce. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We want to move on to talking a bit about an interesting protest that happened on National Day on October the 1st, which was covered in the papers. It was a bit of a interesting argy-bargy type protest where Andrew To, the vice chair of the League of Social Democrats, ended up in handcuffs, didn't he? And was thrown in a police van and had been arrested, and has alleged that he has been hit by the police, and the police are saying that he lashed out or, and so he's on bail, isn't he? And has been arrested for it. And I've actually seen, the clip. It's on YouTube, and perhaps any listeners might want to have a look. If you can type in YouTube, and what would they type in, Ken, to see, that? It would be in Chinese, would it? Or?
Maybe.
his name Tao Guanhang or Andrew Tao, probably.
Yes, his Chinese name Tao Guanhang.
Put his Chinese name in and saying...
And you will find that in recent ones. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, watching the clip, I've watched it a couple of times, and it's difficult to see exactly what happened, as often these things are, and depending on the angle, actually.
That's right.
Depending on the angle, and if you ask 10 different people, they'll probably give you 10 different answers to it.
And also, the other point is whether it's intentional.
Absolutely right, and that in terms of the law, that is very, very important. Actually, you're right. I mean, you've seen the clip actually as well, haven't you, Simon?
Yes.
What did you make of it?
First of all, you're right. Sometimes it depends on angle, but based on, I'm also looking at facial expression. I don't think it's intentional, from what I've seen. And also I also look at, Andrew To's wife's facial expression. I think she was shocked that her husband was handcuffed. So you can see in many ways, it was unimaginable for her that, so and I mean for people who knew Andrew To, I don't know him personally, but I mean from his performance in the previous election, candidates meeting, he seems quite gentle. I mean, and it's quite unimaginable he would do such a thing.
Yeah, I do. I know him quite well, and
I gave him a call.
It's it does surprise me actually when you hear he's been arrested and so on. But I mean, I think it's the second time actually. I think he a few months ago or last year or 6 months ago was charged with another incident during a protest where a couple of activists were taken to court and charged for assault as well, isn't it, on a police, sort of minor assault on a police officer, and so on. So it's, it's a similar kind of incident, isn't it? But you can imagine, speaking from someone who's been on protests, it can get a bit, heated and so on. And, looking at the clip, it was obviously that there was a lot of argy-bargy and stuff. And, from what I gathered, it looked like the police were, pressing in unnecessarily on protesters actually, because they were just standing there outside the Central Liaison Office in Western District, exercising their constitutional right to demonstrate. They weren't doing anything other than that. They had placards and they were holding a coffin and so on, and raising awareness about human rights and calling for justice to do with Tiananmen Square and so on, on important day, on October the 1st. And I would say, it is important, and they've got the right to protest. Some people, some Chinese people might say, they shouldn't protest on that day, and I would say, quite the opposite. It is important, especially on important dates, to speak out, I think, about what is important, what sort of society you want to live in, as Chinese people living in Hong Kong and in China. What do you think about the fact it was on that day, on National Day, on October 1st? Because obviously it might be seen as amongst some people as controversial.
Because in Andrew To's case, he was there, he wasn't wearing the LSD's hat, but the hat he was wearing was a wrap from the Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic democratic movements in China, and that explains that it's a patriotic act to demonstrate. On October the 1st.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anti-communist.
I mean, to be patriotic doesn't mean that you have to love the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. Yeah. Just in US, to be patriotic, you don't have to love Democratic Party or Republican Party. But so I think they're really, just like when you go to the candlelight vigil on June the 4th, you can show how well you love the country by attending it. So I think it's quite interesting that I don't know whether it's a surprise for you, but thousands of people turned out. But given the wave of celebrations, it was quite a good turnout, I think. Don't you think so?
For the protest? Yeah, absolutely. And I think that whole argument, it has to be made, the intellectual argument that, if you love your country and you want to make your country better, you should be willing to speak out and about important issues about human rights and how to make it better, and the fight for democracy.